Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest culture vulture. And it's time for a video where I put down some thoughts on Kanye West's latest record, The Life of Pablo. Not really about the music as much as about the promotional process and the fact that after this record saw a widespread release on Tidal, and of course there were tons of downloads of this record all over the internet, Kanye saw fit to change the record very slightly, but still change the record all the same. The current track list of the album is a little different, and Kanye, as he said on Twitter, fixed wolves. He put Vic Mensa's verse back on the track. He put Sia's vocals back on the track. I was expecting maybe something entirely different or just different mixes or whatever. But this leaves some questions open for me. Is this a sign that Kanye isn't really all that committed to this artistic statement? Or is it a sign that he cares about this artistic statement so much that he would continue to change it after it had already seen mass exposure? And moving into the future, should albums be changed once they're released? Can the album become this living, breathing, ever-evolving thing, or should it kind of be like a test that an artist works hard on away from his or her audience and then hands it in, and if it's good, it's good, if it's bad, it's bad? The way Kanye went about changing this record reminded me of a few different things in other artistic mediums. It reminded me of new computer technology. It reminded me of software. It reminded me of video games. Things that consistently have software or hardware updates or maybe downloadable content that adds to the previously existing thing that you purchased and maybe makes it function better. And in the internet age, doing this sort of thing with albums is incredibly feasible, especially with cloud streaming and platform streaming, as well as platforms like iTunes where you can buy a record and then have the songs re-downloaded if you lose them. Potentially you could have newer versions of songs downloaded onto your computer once you bought the album if you don't care for the older versions or you want to update the record. Already I could see some people kind of calling sacrilege at this. You know, imagine how many classic and fantastic records that have come out over the past 15, 20, 30, 40 years. If they were to see large-scale changes like this, there's already enough drama and hubbub over albums from the Beatles and Pink Floyd when they're undergoing some kind of remaster process, and then all of a sudden the new version sounds totally different because EQ and compression and mixing have a lot to do with how a record sounds. Imagine if these albums were starting to see changes compositionally and lyrically. Now, it's all very possible for this stuff to happen, and it has happened, but moving into the future, is it probable? If this were going to be some kind of regularly seen model 5 years from now, just like anything in the music industry, it would have to generate either buzz or money. And when Kanye West says or does anything, it's guaranteed hype. It's guaranteed controversy. So for Kanye to do something like this, it's kind of understandable. For him to take these sorts of risks, it's only going to mean more attention for him at the end of the day. But what about more obscure groups? What about indie groups? What about groups that are doing it full time, but they're not internationally known or anything like that? There might not really be the financial incentive for them to continually write and rewrite the same album over and over and over again. Now, I guess out there already, we already have demo albums, we have remix albums, we have live albums, we have remixed songs with new instrumentals and features from other artists. We have things like that new Boris album that just dropped, which is essentially a grouping of tracks the band has already played, already recorded, songs that if you're a fan of the band, you already know them, but now they sort of accompany Merzbow, just adding some, extra noise into the mix. For decades, musicians have always done a really great job of following the power of technology and allowing technology to empower them to make some really interesting art. And I guess what's going to need to happen is some musician out there is going to have to take it upon themselves to take this risk, do something different, and maybe provide some kind of weird conceptual art piece that, like I said earlier, is ever-changing, and use these platforms to continually evolve this piece of art for listeners. And of course, this piece of art is going to have to be great, and it's going to have to be moving, and it's going to have to be entertaining, or else this idea is just never going to catch on. We're going to need a powerful record to sort of plant this seed, plant this idea in the minds of other musicians. But maybe allowing something like this to happen and accepting something like this could potentially be really bad for music, or potentially paint music itself into a corner. Look at the movie industry right now. How many movies come out every year, some of which are decent, that are just merely reboots of stuff that came out 20, 30 years ago. It's so funny that that's just something that we don't really have in the music community. Nobody is coming out with a new record and they're like, hey man, we're gonna reboot the Beatles' Revolver. You're never gonna have this new rap group come out and just like reboot 36 Chambers and just like redo the whole record, but themselves. There are some examples I could think of that come close. There are cover songs, there are interesting covers albums, but when these things happen, they're not huge celebratory box office events. They're usually met with mixed reviews, and a lot of people are groaning about how they ruined the classic. Also, you can take into account artists that are new artists that come out. They break out and they sound exactly like older artists, or they're just pulling so heavily from older artists. That is very much another way that, you know, sort of themes and sounds and ideas sort of repeat themselves in modern music, much in the same way they are repeated in a movie reboot. I'm getting off track though. All that being said, could new internet technology bring us into a future where the album is an ever-changing piece of art? If album sales keep dropping, then maybe this will sort of be a thing. You know, people will have incentive to stream a new album every single time it gets changed. That could be a way that this works. Or is everything I've said dumb and make no sense and will never ever happen and idiot, dumb ass? In a way, it puts the control back in the hands of the artist. Once an album is out there, typically, especially if it's on a physical medium, you can't really do anything about it. It's out there. That's part of what makes music so interesting. It's not like you're a painter and there's just kind of like one real copy of your painting out there. I mean, of course, you know, you could sort of make copies and take pictures and all that, but there's only one authentic version of this painting. With an album, every single copy of that record is the same as any other copy. You can't buy some other copy and all of a sudden it's a better copy or the more authentic copy or anything like that. I mean, I guess you have like master tapes of a record, but we don't like hang those in a museum. You know what I mean? If everyone is streaming and the artist has full control over that one album everybody's streaming online and they can change it at any time, maybe this could be a trend that occurs pretty regularly. Turns out this feature didn't work. Turns out that mix was bad. Turns out that track was a filler track. Turns out that single wasn't a good single. There could be a myriad of reasons to change an album once it's out there on the internet. So is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Do you want it to happen? I don't know what else to say. So just some thoughts, guys. Transition. What are your thoughts, reactions, ideas, opinions in response to my ideas, thoughts, reactions, and opinions in this video? You guys are the best. Bam! Forever.